I'm gonna be upfront here right away. I don't like Legal Eagle's videos. This is no dig on him as a person. This isn't a takedown video. This isn't some big drama thing. I'm not outing him as anything. As far as I understand the guy, he seems nice. He understands the law pretty well. His head's in the right place, politically speaking. I have no grave, serious beef with him. I just think his videos are a little cheesy. I'm going to point out now that I may be in a unique position here to say that, because as it turns out, I'm a qualified person. I have graduated from redacted law school in redacted USA. That makes me smart in some arbitrary fashion, and it also means that I can use this bit of expertise on hand as a tool to create provocative, dramatic YouTube content. My favorite. See, joking aside, I actually do have an issue with this because on some level it is inevitable. I know what I've done. I've made a clickbait title in hopes that people come and see this video expecting this, drama, a takedown, something. YouTube is a creature that feeds on blood, and since I'm not here to give you such blood so easily, you are free to complain in the comments below. I promise I will read them. I want to talk about this video of his, though, and I'm not sure even exactly why. I don't like it, for an obvious reason. He's wrong about Phoenix Wright, not from a legal standpoint, but in its intent. And here's the tricky factor in this, the kind of interesting question I'm stuck with, right? It's easy to take this video in a bad direction fast, to make this a moralizing event. Oh, Legal Eagle doesn't understand art, he doesn't get the game's vision, and I will defend the artistic vision of Phoenix Wright at some point, sure, but I think that ultimately the issue is in its framing. A lot of videos like this start from a pretty weird assumption about the function and purpose of art that depicts things like this, and that they're, like, on some level made to be judged by their accuracy. Like, Phoenix Wright has kind of failed on some part because it's supposed to be showing us how the law works and has gotten a D- and an F, respectively, between these two videos, complete with a guest appearance from an even more qualified expert to opine, and I don't know. I don't like this. I don't like this, and I also don't want to just go, it's art, it doesn't have to make sense, because that's kind of a disingenuous argument to make. Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Gyaktan Saiban, however you want to call it, wasn't made to be a series of comedically slanted adventure games that arbitrarily decided to be about the law, and I think that reconciling this, the purpose and function of real-to-life accuracy in art, is a more interesting question to be had than reading people to filth for liking clickbaity React content, right? Is that what this video is going to be about? Sure. Why not? So let's begin with a weird conversational take, one that I came across almost immediately upon getting into the series while in high school. Yes, Phoenix Wright, despite all the efforts made to localize it into American fiction story, is not about American law. This is a topic of discussion among fans that I've never seen get particularly vitriolic, and I hope that's just because the translation is kind of iconic camp, and not that I just haven't looked into it deep enough, but the point is made so robustly that Legal Eagle did do a follow-up video with a real Japanese lawyer to confirm that the series is, in fact, not an accurate representation of the law. But I will say, for my own satisfaction, as I'm by far not the first cat to observe such a thing, Phoenix Wright has one kind of critical overlap with reality, in that the depiction of specifically the crime statistics are pretty comparable to that of Japan at the time. The framing around this situates Gyaktan Saiban as weirdly politically minded, a little piece of lighthearted activism, calling the injustice of the legal system into question, and, well, so here's an interview I dug up from gyaktansaibanlibrary.blogspot.com, which portrays series creator Shitakumi's perspective on the creation of the series as focused less on legal research and accuracy, and more on evoking the feeling of suspense in a court drama while making a mystery game, ultimately. That's why the cases conclude with finding the real killer each time. Now, also in this interview, the question was raised: why make it in a courtroom at all if you're not going to research an accurate portrayal of the law? And that, if anything else, validates my own concerns. I'm not the only person who asked this of the series, but see, I think in working through this, there's something more at play, right? This isn't simply a whole cloth disregard for the law in favor of whimsy, right? Like, Takumi clearly shares this perspective, though maybe not wording it nearly as pretentious as I'm about to. Ace Attorney is a work of art. So let's answer the first and most obvious question. What does Phoenix Wright seek to do as a work of art? Well, some of these things we can tick off pretty easily. It's clearly a comedy, or at least comedically slanted, which adds a novel spin to a game that basically requires every case to have a murder in it. That's not to say that dramatic moments don't happen. Obviously, there's a lot of drama and sentiment, but the tone isn't so grim and serious that the game's central ideas are warped around them. It's a game about justice, truth, and defending the innocent. Easy. This is where I start to take specific issue here with Mr. Stone's video.
Don't forget, to argue a solid defense, you have to believe in him and his innocence.
Right.
Not necessarily. All clients are owed an advocate, and often you are conflicted because you may see the evidence and you may believe that they are guilty or liable of what they're accused of. I have heard from my public defender friends, those people who provide defenses to the indigent, that it can actually be harder if you truly believe that someone is innocent.
So, the issue here is that, yes, from a strictly objective perspective on the realities of our legal system, every attorney is expected to provide the best counsel they can give to their clients. It's part of having a fair trial and a fair judicial system. Phoenix Wright isn't about that. The game's premise is built around Phoenix on the back foot in every case he ever gets, trying to defend clients from nigh impossible odds. It starts simple with his friend getting accused of killing his girlfriend and escalates through the first game alone to defending Edgeworth after he was found in a boat holding a gun in it, the other passenger found dead via bullet wound. So, as a meaningful counterbalance to Phoenix's overwhelming odds is a staunch belief in his client. See, these games aren't made to be a game developer's best attempt at recreating litigation. They're made to evoke a feeling, as the creator said. It feels daunting to go into one of these cases with a client that seems guilty at every conceivable angle, just as it feels triumphant when you turn it all around. This is the nature of the beast, so going at it through the lens of legal procedure can at best feel meaningless.
You don't scream in a courtroom.
I'm happy to hear that.
And at worst, feel exhausting.
And this is so ridiculous. The ghost of the dead woman provides a list of names.
And okay, to be fair to Eagle et al., he has been using specifically the anime adaptation of Phoenix Wright, which is worse, in my opinion. It kind of destroys the slicker abstractions and trappings of the video game format, so it really makes more dire changes to legal procedure pop out way more, but the point still stands that the framework, the mindset, is still unproductive. So, yes, to be clear and to reaffirm, I do not think DJ Stone was incorrect about the law as he described it, but this video is missing the point of the game. I was actually worried that going to law school would have ruined my appreciation for these games, but they feel like apples and oranges. If you want, for fun, I can break down the procedure for the first trial if it were a case in American court. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm bringing in an even more qualified professional. Hold on. Colleen, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to help me here. I'm led to believe that I'm now allowed to say that a real lawyer is, in fact, reacting. Is that correct?
Yeah, I passed the bar and everything, so I think that I qualify.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So your assessment of Phoenix Wright, as far as accuracy considering the law, favorable. What are you thinking?
Phoenix Wright is weird because it is actually shockingly correct in a lot of areas. And obviously I'm an American lawyer. I have no idea what's happening in Japan in their court system. But as far as things that I see, there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That's how that works. And then there's stuff that's just wild that makes no goddamn sense to me. And I Google it. I'm like, is this a thing in Japan? And it's like, no, they just made that up. So I would say it's middle ground because there's enough stuff that somebody did their research and then just decided that most law wasn't fun enough and then added their own things.
Yeah, I actually do have an interview that I did scrounge up from Shu Takumi, who is the lead developer for Phoenix Wright, who says that like at the very start of the process, he just had no interest in doing any research in the law at all because he just wanted to make like a fun mystery game that was set in a courtroom.
You know what? That's fair. That's valid.
Yeah, I think that shows. I think that you get that. Anyway, talking aside, you've prepared a statement on the state v. Larry Butts, right?
Yeah.
So you have the floor. I will mute. Go for it.
Yeah. So first of all, my credentials, I am a public defender in Wisconsin. I am not speaking on behalf of the public defender. They require I say that whenever I do anything public. And because criminal procedure is different in all 50 states, this is not true across the entire country, but there's broad similarities. So what I'm about to say is what would be true in my jurisdiction and might be similar to what's true wherever you, wonderful viewer, are living. So first, we have like the investigation of the crime, where I agree the police would come to the conclusion that it was Larry extremely quickly, because it obviously seems like he did it. So almost immediately after the crime, as happens in the game, he would be arrested, and then they would try to interrogate him. Larry, like all good criminal defendants, would in fact say that he wants a lawyer with him and refuse to make a statement. So then he goes before a judge within 3 days of being arrested to be formally charged and for his bail to be set. This is the biggest diversion between Phoenix Wright and real life, is I can't have a trial 3 days after the case is started because I don't even know my client yet. But at this first hearing, he would get his lawyer. Luckily, Larry Butts knows the guy, so he gets Phoenix Wright. Bail would be set extremely high in a case like this. Where I would expect between $250,000 and $1 million for general homicides. So he would be in custody like he is for the rest of the case. Then, so we've had our initial appearance. That's where you plead not guilty and you get your case started. He would then have a preliminary hearing within 10 days. This is where Detective Gumshoe comes in and testifies about the basics of the case, and Phoenix gets to come in and cross-examine the police officer. And maybe Detective Gumshoe screws up, and they fumble, and the case gets dismissed 99 out of 100 times. The case gets moved on to the next phase and is bound over for trial. Other states do this with a grand jury proceeding. I've never been in front of a grand jury. I don't know what they're like. But this is how states that do preliminary hearings work. So we have been bound over for trial, we've pled not guilty, and now the state has to turn over all discovery, which is, I think, one of the other really big differences between a Phoenix Wright and real life, is well before the trial, I should have anything exculpatory, the names of the witnesses the state intends to call, written and recorded statements of those witnesses, all physical evidence they intend to use, and this all has to be turned over what's called a reasonable time before trial, but usually within a month or two, less than a month of entering this not guilty plea and getting your case bound over. So there's none of this, like they show up and they're like, oh yeah, actually here's the autopsy report, sorry we forgot to give it to you. But with that discovery in hand, we begin investigating the case. So Phoenix going to the investigation and talking to witnesses, going to the scene and talking to people, totally realistic, except that he should bring a civilian investigator with him, because Phoenix, I think, makes himself a witness pretty regularly, because sometimes witnesses tell me something and then they get into trial and they're like, actually, I never said that. So I need someone who can then testify, yes, you did say that on June 26th or whatever when you spoke to me, which is why anytime I talk to a witness or I go to a scene, I have an investigator with me. Usually it is someone who works in my office. After we get all of this discovery and start the investigation, usually about 30 days from the preliminary hearing, we go to court for a pretrial conference and we tell the court what we want to do. That can be setting the case for trial, asking for more time, or setting the case for a plea. This is Phoenix Wright, so all of our clients are not guilty, and we would never plead. So let's assume that Butts wants it to move very quickly, and he has to set up for trial at their first pretrial conference. He can also demand a speedy trial demand, which in Wisconsin means that they have to schedule the trial within 90 days. So between this, we continue investigating, we prepare for the trial. That means about 130 days after the arrest, Larry Butts is going to be actually brought to trial. The United States defaults to jury trials. So the first day, we're going to pick a jury in a process called voir dire, where we try and find jurors who can't be fair to the case, and each side gets to ask the jury questions and kick off people for basically any reason: vibes, nasty looks, stupid answers. The only reason you can't kick someone off a jury in the United States is for race or gender, which is called a Batson issue. You're not allowed to kick all of the black people off of the juries. That is illegal because prosecutors have tried. Then after we picked the jury come opening statements. First the prosecution goes, then the defense goes. These are what you see on TV, where there's like, stand up and explain, here's why I think he did it, and here's why I think he didn't do it. And then we get to what actually gets shown in the Phoenix Wright games, which is Phoenix and Edgeworth calling witnesses. Wait, it's not Edgeworth in the first case, whatever. So the prosecutor and the defense attorney call witnesses. The first rule of cross-examination generally is that you never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Phoenix does not follow this rule, which I would advise new attorneys against doing. I regularly train new attorneys. But on the other hand, I've never had someone confess to murder on the stand, so it's possible that Phoenix is just a better lawyer than me. We do object, but most of the reasons that Phoenix objects aren't real reasons. I can object when evidence isn't admissible or a form of question is improper, but I don't just get to object, I don't like what he just said. So a correct objection would be something like, objection, hearsay, and yeah, you can pound the table if you want to. Objection, hearsay, and then you explain why it's hearsay. But the full, like, objections you see in Phoenix Wright are not accurate. After the state has called all of its witnesses, the defense can call theirs, including, if we wanted to, Larry, if he decides he wants to testify. I would advise Larry to not testify because I think that he will be a terrible witness, and I don't think he would hold out under cross-examination. Once we have called any of our witnesses, then we get to closing arguments. The state goes first. Here's why you should find him guilty. The defense goes, here's why you should find him not guilty. And then the prosecution goes last, which I agree with Donald Trump for once in my life. This isn't fair. The prosecution shouldn't get to go last, but they are allowed. The judge reads the jury a whole bunch of instructions, and the jury goes back. They deliberate or debate about the verdict until they come to a unanimous decision. This deliberation can be minutes, hours, or days. It's really up to them. Trials do vary widely in length, and my understanding is that Japanese trials actually do have to be quite short. But I think for my jurisdiction, Larry Butts' case does feel like a kind of a 3-day case, so I don't think it's wildly out of the realm of possibility for how long they say it takes. The most shocking thing about Larry Butts' case is how quickly it moves from charge to trial. I usually would not enter a speedy trial demand on a murder case. Typically, I would say on my murder cases, I am going to trial 6 months to 18 months after the death. So literally a week after the death is surprising. Obviously, this might be different in your state, but this is some variations about what it might look like across the United States.
I think I keep on forgetting the name of the first prosecutor in the first case. I think it's Winston Payne. It doesn't matter.
He doesn't matter. He's not cool like Edgeworth.
Yeah. No, this is great.
Wait, can I add for posterity a funny anecdote about Phoenix Wright?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so there's a prosecutor she's nice. I don't hate her. I don't like prosecutors generally, but this one's fine. She has on her water bottle like an objection sticker in the Phoenix Wright font. And I went up to her one day and I was like, "Hey, Elaine, you know that you're the villain in the Phoenix Wright games, right?" And she was like, "Well, Edgeworth isn't really a villain." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the prosecution is." And then she was like, "Okay, it's fine. You're allowed to harass me about my Phoenix Wright appreciation." But I really appreciate that Phoenix Wright is like the last bastion of defense attorneys being the good guys. Because we used to have like Perry Mason and like all of like Matlock and stuff, and now everything's all this Law and Order SVU. Defense attorneys are evil. So yeah. Phoenix Wright is holding against the thin blue line, and I love him for it.
I mean, Miles Edgeworth later on in the series gets a redemption arc, and that's largely by him taking a turn at being a defense attorney. So
that's what I was saying.
Like, you
know,
know,
she's like, "Oh, it's okay that Edgeworth gets better," and I'm like, "Yeah, but prosecutors are still bad. Like, Phoenix Wright is very anti-DA.
Yeah, and we love it for it.
I've only played the first 2 games. Maybe it gets more pro-DA late game.
All right. Thank you so much. Again, I know you're super busy, and this is very last minute for this, but this was a delight. Thank you.
Happy to help.
So, like, it gets weird to talk about Phoenix Wright in both cases. I think it's evident that it's not really interested in being about legal accuracy, but it's also silly on some level to talk about its thematic ambitions when the general vibe of the series is kind of lighthearted fun. The Ace Attorney series is not particularly deep, guys. That's fine, but it clearly wants something out of what it has. You know, they didn't pick law randomly as a context, and if anyone's ever played Ghost Trick from the same team, they'd know they didn't need to. And that kind of draws it to a broader question, right? Phoenix Wright is very obviously not the first piece of art to ever fictionalize legal procedure for drama. It's not even the first time Legal Eagles looked at the accuracy of a piece of fiction. So why? You know, what makes law so compelling a piece of fiction compared to its otherwise kind of mundane, meticulous reality? I want to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird. Near the end of the novel, and more famously, perhaps, the film adaptation, Atticus Finch defends Tom Robinson, a black man accused of raping and assaulting a white woman. The closing argument is one of those scenes in film history, right? The film takes so much time building up to this moment, the film framing the clear moral conversation had here, and this closing speech feels powerful, potent, speaking to something, trying to pull the heart of these people out of the poisoned depths of deeply ingrained racist ideology. But watching back, I couldn't help but notice that a lot of the same arguments Stone makes on Phoenix Wright apply here. Tom Robinson shows up in court dressed kind of casual and shabby. Atticus Finch asks some bizarre questions, and the prosecution never once objects. Barely any evidence was provided. Finch never calls in expert testimony to speak to Robinson's physical condition. The whole thing, by a standard of pure film analysis, is full of elisions and sidesteps and the like. But Legal Eagle has never done a video on Mockingbird, and I kind of get why. When you watch the movie or read the book, you're struck not by the particulars of litigation, but by the powerful ideas, the fragility and necessity of justice, the horrible sensations of communities failing their people, the kind of bizarre world living as a child is, especially as that child is made to witness things she shouldn't. It doesn't feel right to meet the story on the battleground of accuracy, because it clearly has a focus and ideas that transcend it. And even the act of trying to work out loopholes falls kind of flat. Maybe the prosecution was asleep at the wheel because he was so confident in a win he didn't need to. But, like, the effort to try and pin granular issues with legal accuracy to this text feels cheap, petty, and I think that's because something like Mockingbird is very obviously art. And I think that in looking at this, it helps to clarify the issues that I take with this assessment of the Ace Attorney games. Where Phoenix Wright is accurate to the law, it works because Takumi wanted to evoke the tension and the stakes, important things like the amount of power and discretion afforded to the prosecution in the system tips the scales against the defense attorneys to an obscene degree, and that makes the story feel compelling. It's why the game can bend around being lighthearted and comedic in one scene and dramatic and heartfelt in another. You know, tension is everywhere in the process, and that feeling sells the art. In contrast, where Phoenix Wright is wildly inaccurate in the law, it's kind of trivial. Things that are glossed over or done in a way that's definitely incorrect because it would lessen the impact. Trials move so fast in this game, but that's probably because making a video game out of waiting like 130 days and doing discovery and witness depositions and whatnot would be kind of lame, like I said earlier, and every piece of fiction that delves into a real-world field falls into these things. You all remember Yuri on Ice? You think that figure skating is about understanding different forms of love? Like that's fiction, babes. Ah, damn it, I got right back to where I started. Okay, look. enough of all this meandering, enough about art, enough about how fiction works. This is baby stuff. Why do I care? Why is it important enough for me to take an entire month out of my dumb life to think about a very old YouTube video from a creator that, personal feelings about his work aside, I don't think is a bad person by any real means. I don't even think DJ Stone is doing this for antagonistic reasons. Looking through his channel, it becomes pretty clear that his main interest is in teaching basic legal principles to his audience, and he'll use fiction to do it, along with videos about actual news stories developing and whatnot. He is, I think obviously enough, making educational videos. Can't I just let him do that? Well, I have no power to stop him, obviously, but I think the issue goes beyond him. This isn't the first time I've done a video about React content, but I think the trend itself is kind of bad, right? It's one thing to have an expert around, or to have someone who's knowledgeable coming in to explain things, right? I do this all the time on stream with my chat, and it's easy to kind of lean into that and not think about it that clearly when you're, me, and you look at these videos, but, like, the experts in questions are in fields you're not familiar with. It gives the illusion of insight, right? You hear someone go,
"Yeah, that's what I would have did."
And part of you goes, "Oh, shit, yeah, that's cool as hell." But then the conversation will start to shift away from the art itself and into a conversation about how badly whatever the subject is messed up being realistic. Like, I think it's kind of important to talk about this, though, because in my constant mission to try and get people to care more about art in better ways, I think that a lot of the popularity around this content sets up conversations that aren't particularly useful. For every detective story, every mystery that hinges on exact particulars, that demand a close focus on realism, you get art that knows that an adherence to realism would do their story a disservice. Phoenix Wright would be a bad game if it obsessed with real legal procedure, and the fact that Phoenix assistant Maya Fey is a goddamn spirit medium who channels her dead sister to help him win cases from time to time, I don't know, maybe tips the hand there, right? This is kind of why this video has been so weird for me to work out. I can't tell you in clear numbers the kind of cultural impact React content has had on the way we approach stories. I can see the obsession over lore and world building. I can see the adherence to these elements as profound and signs of good writing. I may still live in the shadow of 2010 Spoonie complaining about the realism of Final Fantasy, but when I look at Legal Eagle, I see a weird split. In all ways, it should make sense that he is providing a specific service to a specific audience seeking it. People want to learn about the law and like Phoenix Wright, and he'll use Phoenix Wright to teach people about the law. But there is an undercurrent of, like, winning, like, outsmarting art. You see, that's not how that actually works. Like, the grading he does can really only be read as evaluative of its work as a piece of fiction trying to represent the procedure of the law, and that framework, more than the impact, is the thing I can point to most clearly and disagree with. We have, in our cultural landscape, a hostile relationship with art, and maybe one that's been manufactured by market interests or whatever, I don't fucking know, but there is a habit that all of this has to be something you can outsmart. You can prove that you, or someone you know to be an expert, can prove these stories as falling short of reality. But in the face of profound, transformative art, it all falls away. Here, looking through the internet, I ran across this Robson Krim legal blog post about fact-checking the legal procedure in To Kill a Mockingbird. What's interesting about it is that it spends a lot of time praising the movie for Finch's elegance in building a case, and the grace and patience he uses in cross-examining the victim, Mayella. When the author gets to the parts that the film embellishes or doesn't address, they point out that a lot of this is in service to the dramatic tension these changes afford to the benefit of the audience, summing it up best at the end, and I quote, "So in the real world, the verdict would likely be the same, but the trial would be duller than the movie is, and the elements of Atticus's conduct during the trial, his elegance and subtlety, would have been swept away. But fortunately for the audience, we don't have to superimpose real-world law on it, and we can enjoy it as the masterpiece it is." Does all of this make React content wrong? No. Is it immoral? No. I'm never one to try and deprive people of their junk food. We are, all of us, seeking comfort in an increasingly dreary and cruel world, but I do want to make a plea on behalf of fiction, I guess. Wanting to compete against art to prove yourself more knowledgeable, more informed, more just, whatever. All of that can come at the cost of recognizing that there is more to this stuff that you can genuinely enjoy, that thinking about can be really fulfilling. Phoenix Wright is by no means as profound and weighty and important as To Kill a Mockingbird, but I think you're missing out on the whimsy and ridiculous joy that can come from meeting Ace Attorney where it's at. For every time you, especially if you're a law student, a practicing attorney, whatever, feel it's kind of bizarre that Phoenix can just pocket evidence and throw it out there into court, there is something really kind of compelling in watching a case go from him cross-examining a parrot to appointing a metal detector at the prosecutor to find a missing bullet on the last day a case is opened. You know, that's a tension that you're not going to get by trying to meticulously work out that there has to be an entire procedure. Edgeworth has to be indicted. There has to be a separate court date, on and on and on. Let me tell you one last story to close things out. I had made the decision to be a lawyer for many reasons, and among them, in some small part, was because of these games. I didn't think that was actually how the law works. I wasn't that naive, but what I found appealing in them was the capacity to engage with something that shows there is a dignity and a value in defending others, in standing up for people in a system almost designed to crush them. I always thought to myself, I'd end up being the kind of person, if I ever got into the field, to seek the truth wherever it may be. And I think those ideas, those feelings, are the point of these games. Arguably, evocation like this is the bread and butter of a lot of media, making compromises in reality to draw out a catharsis of emotions from an audience, much to, I guess, the dismay of Bertolt Brecht. Sorry, Brecht, Man equals Man is an emotionally affecting piece of art. You done fucked up. So, look, if you find yourself distancing yourself from something like this, if you're trying to constantly prove to others that you're above such things in art, I don't know. Maybe you're missing out. Special thanks to Alexi Angelica, Athena Stripes, Bees Louise, Blair Renix, Blueberries in My Coffee, Cole Brayfield, Colleen T., Evan Kearns, Foxy Hex, Gail Simmons, Lewis Wells, Low Res, Maria Aladren, Michael McNay, Mocha Lapin, Nariah the Redmarked, Noun Verbly, Professor Bopper, Saint Rawberry, Thomas Volpez, Trade Good, Valerian Wraithwall, and Zetetic. Thank you all so much.